From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today has been provided by the following. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont. Online at wvhtf.org. Connecting West Virginia families and businesses through high-speed internet services. Learn more about connecting at frontier.com.
At the Legislature today, there's been a lot of legislation introduced in the House this session about guns. We asked the House Minority Leader why. Fairs and festivals are an important part of West Virginia's tourism economy. We'll find out how important they are. And we'll talk about election issues with Secretary of State Natalie Tennant on the Legislature Today. And good evening, I'm Beth Voorhees. 3 bills relating to the courts passed the Senate this morning. Senate Bill 386 clarifies the grounds whereby a personal safety order for harassment can be issued. Senate Bill 387 to grant family court judges the authority to compel and supervise the production of a criminal background investigation. And Senate Bill 423 to allow those who are sentenced to 6 months in regional jails to be eligible for good time credit. There was no discussion. Those bills are on their way to the House. That was not the case in committee meetings this morning. As Ashton Mara reports, senators are using that time to work out foreseeable kinks in proposed legislation.
The Senate Judiciary Committee room was full this morning as the Energy, Industry, and Mining Committee took up 3 bills dealing with mining discharges, fracking regulations, and pipeline fees. The first was Senate Bill 463. The State Public Service Commission is charged with inspecting the tens of thousands of miles of pipeline in West Virginia with a budget cap of $316,000. This bill increases the state cap to a total of $400,000. Allowing the PSC to hire an additional pipeline inspector. But Senator Herb Snyder of Jefferson County was concerned with a specific dollar amount being defined in state code.
We're sticking a dollar amount in code. We're going to go back and change it for the maximum. Is there a better way to do this that you can think of?
The governor's budget gave us up to about $386,000 in that range. We asked for an increase to $400,000 in case over the next few years some costs, incremental costs go up, whether it's for equipment or personnel or employee benefits. That way we'd have a little bit of a ceiling so we don't have to come back here every single year and ask for an increase.
Senate Bill 463 was unanimously passed by the committee and moved on to Senate Finance for second reference. The committee then moved on to Senate Bill 245, which allows the Department of Environmental Protection to enact a rule relating to horizontal well drilling. The 18 sections of this bill define the standards of safety that must be met at each drilling site, but it was an amendment proposed by Snyder that started a more in-depth discussion.
Is there any amendments to the bill? Senator Snyder.
Mr. Chairman, I have a amendment which council has in hand regarding the confidentiality of the fracking fluid compounds. Council could address that. He has the amendment.
The amendment would require any emergency medical professional given access to the recipe of chemicals contained in a company's frack water sign a confidentiality agreement when treating patients who have been exposed. Counsel from the DEP explained those components vary from company to company and are considered a trade secret. But Senator Evan Jenkins of Cabell County was concerned with the amount of time an agreement may take. He questions Kristen Boggs, general counsel for the DEP.
In the hasten emergency situation, if that has a slowdown or a chilling effect of, ooh, I'm not sure what I'm promising to. My focus is on the patient, addressing their needs. I'm trying to think of similar circumstances where you've got somebody having to promise something before they can get information to render care.
We share your concerns, and our hope, of course, is that it doesn't slow down the process. I will tell you that this language is substantially similar to what happens in the state of Colorado, and so and Pennsylvania also has the information about the confidentiality to the doctors.
Phil Reel, a representative of the Independent Oil and Gas Association, says those lists are already required by Occupational Safety and Health Administration standards to be maintained on site. And while the lists may not contain the concentration of each individual chemical in the frack water, it is readily available in case of a spill or investigation. The Senate Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure took up a bill today that also began some discussion between senators. Senate Bill 190 is a proposal from Governor Tomlin that modifies a statute already in place. It deals with public-private partnerships, allowing government agencies in the state to work with private businesses to fund and build roadways. But the funding was an issue for Senator Doug Facemeyer of Braxton County. He questioned Kathy Holtzclaw from the Department of Transportation.
A group gets together and decides that they would like to build this highway. Will they get their money back through tolls?
They could do tolls, they could do bonds. It would be negotiated.
Well, but I mean, if they do bonds, how they get their money to pay the bonds?
Now that I can't answer.
Well, okay.
Facemeyer says he's not against the bill, but there are still uncertainties he feels need to be defined.
There's a lot of unanswered questions here of what happens. And again, the part that I'm having trouble with is how these people get their money back, whether it's done by tax dollars or it's done by tolls, and then, who's responsible to making sure that this company stays healthy so that they can do the prudent things that they need to do to maintain this highway. Because, let's be honest, as a state, we struggle to maintain our own highways.
Committee Chair Senator Bob Beach of Monongalia County says the funding is still an issue the state hasn't resolved, but no public-private partnership projects have been started in West Virginia. He says this bill takes the legislative approval out of that process to begin new projects. Beach says we can look to other states that have similar programs for answers.
A good example is the state of Indiana. They sold all of their highways to a private firm, and they received a lump sum of money for the next 50 years. So a lot of those roads in the state, especially their major highways, are now toll roads. So they're going to recoup their money through those tolls over the next 50 years. At the end of that 50 years, they get new highways, improved highways, but then the state takes them over again.
Another bill from Governor Tomlin, Senate Bill 185, relating to alternative fuel motor vehicles, also known as his natural gas vehicle bill, was removed from today's agenda. Beach says there are a few more items the committee wants to clarify before presenting the bill. For the Legislature Today, I'm Ashton Mara in the Senate.
With no bills up for passage, most of the goings-on in the House of Delegates focused on the introduction of bills and referrals to the appropriate committee. Dave Mistich takes a look at two bills that were introduced during the floor session today.
19 bills were introduced in the House today, including House Bill 2907. That bill was introduced by Delegate Linda Phillips of Wyoming County.
The bill that I introduced today is a trespassing bill on coal mining property, but it's also with the intent to damage something or steal something that might result in either miners being injured or miners having to be pulled out of a mine because of lack of ventilation in the mines. And it even includes first responders and firefighters and people that would respond to that incident. It also covers other industries like your power companies, your telephone companies, that if somebody steals wire, trespasses on their lines, so to speak, and steals things, that causes a whole area to be without cell service or phone service, more specifically, that if there's a fire, they can't call 911 to report the fire, so therefore firefighters can't go, and that might damage property in the long run. It might be a domino effect of cutting those wires or stealing that copper.
Phillips said the bill would increase the penalties for those who might damage an industry or might cause harm to others. She also said protesters of coal and other industries are not necessarily included under the provisions of the bill, but would be if they intend to or act on disrupting the operations of the company or industry they are protesting. With yesterday's passing of House Bill 2760, which would nullify current municipal ordinances relating to firearms and create a statewide uniform regulation, The House of Delegates has seen nearly 30 bills related to firearms so far this session. Today, House Bill 2911 was added to that list. That bill was introduced by Delegate Michael Folk of Berkeley County.
Basically exempts concealed carry permit holders from their information being requested via FOIA to kind of prevent what happened up in the New York area, where one of the newspapers up there went and published a whole list of everybody that had a concealed carry permit up in New York. Now it exempts, obviously still law enforcement can still get access to that information for obvious reasons. It's a good public safety thing, but that way, people's private information should be kept private. And whether you, just like, your information for assessment, for instance, in real estate is private. So why shouldn't the fact that you own certain guns be kept private?
Folk said that the publication of information related to concealed carry permits could be detrimental to those who have one.
There's a lot of different effects it could have. You're telling who may or may not own a gun. You're telling who may or may not be carrying a gun. And there are good and bad aspects about having it and not having it, but I think mostly it's detrimental to those individuals, their private information being put out and published in a newspaper like happened in New York.
Just last week, House Minority Leader Tim Armstead introduced House Bill 2884, which would limit exceptions to the Freedom of Information Act. When asked if House Bill 2911 contradicts his own bill, Armstead explained that some exceptions are important.
I do think, as I said, I think there are some legitimate exceptions. And the concern about putting the names of people who have concealed carry permits is that could actually put people in danger. If people know that who has and who doesn't have a concealed carry permit, particularly if you have domestic relations problems or issues, that there could be a concern there that someone's safety might be put in danger. So I think that is a legitimate exception to the Freedom of Information Act, but I think a lot of these other exceptions are not legitimate.
Armstead also commented on whether or not the Republican gains in November's election have bolstered attention to legislation related to guns this session.
Well, I think there's certainly, within our Republican caucus, I think there is a great interest in preserving constitutional rights in general. And certainly the Second Amendment is a very important constitutional right to West Virginians. And so I think that we have seen a lot of our Republican members interested in ensuring that those rights are protected. And I think that has played out a good bit in what's taken place so far in this session.
For the Legislature Today, I'm Dave Mistich in the House of Delegates.
In a moment, a visit with West Virginia's Secretary of State. First, here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the Senate today. Among the bills introduced in the Senate today, Senate Bill 497 to improve state emergency preparedness. The bill requires the Commissioner of Highways to erect signs on the interstates and other roadways relating to directions to emergency shelters. It requires the Office of Emergency Services to coordinate with local radio and television stations to broadcast public service announcements with information as to the location of emergency shelters. The bill provides tax credits for use of natural gas, propane, gasoline, or diesel-fueled emergency generators. And the bill provides a protection from civil or criminal liability to persons who donate foods during times of emergencies. Senate Bill 499 to prohibit surcharges by sellers when a buyer elects to use a credit card as a method of payment, and to require sellers to make clear and conspicuous disclosure of fees which are otherwise charged. And Senate Bill 504 to permit 3 or more persons producing agricultural products to form a profit or nonprofit cooperative association. Up for passage in the Senate tomorrow, Senate Bill 200, relating to eyewitness identification, lineups, and show-ups, establishing certain recommended procedures before a lineup or show-up, setting forth additional instructions to be given prior to a lineup or show-up. And Senate Bill 372, to create a criminal offense for intentionally interfering with or preventing a person from calling for the assistance of emergency service personnel, and to establish criminal penalties. It's always interesting to talk about the various bills that are introduced having to do with elections and other matters. Tonight, our guest is the Chief Elections Officer for the state of West Virginia. Natalie Tennant was sworn in as the state's 29th Secretary of State in January 2009 and was sworn in again just this past January.
Yes.
Welcome.
Can you believe 4 years have gone by fast?
They have gone by fast when you're having fun.
That's right. And we've done a lot of things in the last 4 years. How about 7 elections?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Statewide elections. Yeah.
First thing I want to ask you about, lessons learned from the election and Superstorm Sandy. That was a nail biter. That storm came through right at the end of October. You're getting ready for a big statewide election. What did you learn from that?
That's a great question, because what we learned is how well West Virginians work together. We know we found ourselves in crisis before, and especially with natural disasters, but I found that how well County Clerk, Secretary of State, the National Guard, remember, we voted folks in 5 different precincts with those drash tents, those military tents that were heated and had electricity because there was power outage. I also learned that, you know, because we had that whole week in advance where we were on ultra alert, in a sense, that come election day, November 6th, it ran very smoothly. And so what I think that we'll try to take into that even more, because there's a lot of preparation that already goes in place for an election, that perhaps we can up it a little bit in those couple of weeks before, so then that election day runs even smoother. Because it was amazing.
It was very smooth. And you had, you know, the polls were open on time.
Right.
And the election results were done by 9, 10 o'clock at night. No charges of voter fraud, no charges of any irregularities at all on that day.
No, not on November 6th. I think what people see now, they see a Secretary of State, and I know I talk about this a lot, but you know, you only have your record, especially after you've been in one term. Now I have my record. You can praise me or criticize me for what I've done on my record, and as the Secretary of State who has the most investigations for election fraud, the most convictions for election law violations, people see that we take this very seriously. And if you're calling, more importantly, if you're signing an official complaint with an official affidavit and you're signing your name, you're willing to put yourself out, we're going to put ourselves out and investigate. And I think that people see that now, that we take it very seriously.
Speaking of which, of the recent vote fraud cases from Lincoln County, they had to do with absentee ballots. What were these guys doing? They were filling out absentee ballots, other people's absentee ballots?
Well, in some cases, what took place is when you have an absentee ballot, and an absentee ballot process is very important. It's important for those folks who are homebound, who have work restrictions, that might not be able to go vote. So the process is very important for accessibility. And what took place was you have to, it's an excuse, you have to have a reason for a mail-in absentee ballot. You don't have to have a reason when you go to early vote. Right. So the first step in the process is you have to fill out a request. You send that to the county clerk, and then the clerk sends you back a ballot. What these folks were doing, the sheriff, the county commissioner, and because of the county clerk was part of that, asking people to request the ballot that may or may not have needed it, and then they were receiving the ballot. And in some cases, the sheriff was showing up and standing in front of someone and saying, you know, I'm voting for so-and-so, not necessarily telling someone. And I think in about 6 cases, he actually did it himself. He actually voted himself.
And these
so folks, the process is good, but there are folks who want to manipulate it.
That's right. The integrity of the process is just really, really important. These folks are doing jail time, aren't they?
Yes, they're all in federal prison right now.
Natalie Tennant, an interesting conversation about elections. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And here's a look at some of the bills introduced in the House today. Among the bills introduced in the House today, House Bill 2901 to specify the allocation of payment of salaries and benefits for school-based juvenile probation officers in counties which have established a truancy program in a judicial circuit where a grant is provided by the County Board of Education to the Supreme Court of Appeals to hire a school-based juvenile probation officer to handle truancy matters. House Bill 2903 to create the Economic Fairness Act and encourage economic development in counties with high unemployment. House Bill 2904, creating the Office of State Employee Ombudsman to serve as an impartial investigator and advocate for executive branch employees who request an investigation into employee issues in the executive branch of state government. The state employee ombudsman may investigate any office in the executive branch of state government or any person paid with public money for compliance with any law, rule, or policy related to employment issues. The position shall be employed by the Joint Legislative Committee on Government and Finance. House Bill 2905 to establish anesthesia patient safety standards for office-based surgery. And House Bill 2911 to exempt records of concealed weapon license applications and issuance from disclosure under the West Virginia Freedom of Information Act. The information may be released to a law enforcement agency to assist in a criminal investigation or prosecution or to determine the validity or eligibility for a license. Up for passage in the House tomorrow, House Bill 2397 to authorize a county commission to temporarily fill vacancies in the offices of the clerk of the county commission, prosecuting attorney, sheriff, assessor, and county surveyor. The bill permits the temporary successors to serve a maximum of 60 days. House Bill 2414 to permit a municipality to convey property to a nonprofit for a specific public interest that benefits the municipality. House Bill 2729 to allow epinephrine auto-injectors to be maintained in schools for emergency treatment during anaphylactic reactions. And House Bill 2747 to define the terms special, regular, and emergency meetings. The bill requires state agencies to file meeting notices electronically with the Secretary of State instead of requiring publication in the state register. On second reading, House Bill 2567 to establish procedures for the administrative dissolution by the Secretary of State of limited partnerships and for the revocation and reinstatement of a foreign limited partnership's certificate of authority. Visitors to the Capitol today were offered snacks, including a golden delicious apple and a strawberry shortcake cookie, courtesy of the West Virginia Association of Fairs and Festivals. Suzanne Higgins reports members want to remind lawmakers of just how important fairs and festivals are to tourism and economic development.
The state's spring season of fairs and festivals is just around the corner. It kicks off in mid-May with the 72nd West Virginia Strawberry Festival in Buchanan.
Well, with strawberries, we have strawberry recipe competition, sweetest berry competition, strawberry auctions, strawberry basket auctions. We have a chef's choice auction. I mean, you name it, you can get it strawberries, from chocolate covered dip to strawberry rhubarb pies. You name it, it's there for 10 days at least.
Board member Deborah Hupp says her community of 20,000 grows to 100,000 during the Strawberry Festival, and that's just the way she likes it.
We do want to honor the strawberry growers. That is our main thing, and we try to do, promote tourism for our state. Whenever you come into the central West Virginia area, you will find that it is a beautiful location in Upshur County. So we've always encouraged, stay in state, do your little vacations as state, and just start out with Strawberry Festival.
The West Virginia Association of Fairs and Festivals had more than 20 members at the Capitol, showcasing the Mountain State Arts and Crafts Fair in Ripley, the State Fair in Fairleigh, the West Virginia Pumpkin Festival in Milton, and the Treasure Mountain Festival in Franklin, among others. Board member Deborah Gard says the events preserve and share the state's rich culture and history.
The Little Levels Heritage Fair over in Marlington that celebrates Pearl Buck. And we have the Mountain State Art and Craft Fair, which has over 170 exhibitors, and they're all heritage and the traditional arts and craftsmen that can use the original way that they used to do arts and crafts, but they also crank in the new things that they're doing. But they do demonstrations, hands-on, where you can actually see what they're doing. And that's very unique. You don't see that very often. So you have an opportunity also to come in and make your own items at the Mountain State Art and Craft Fair, so you can learn how to do this art. They're all over the state like that. There's opportunities to see what West Virginia is all about and celebrate what West Virginia is all about.
Gard says there are 135 fairs and festivals in West Virginia throughout the year, and the economic impact to their local communities is profound.
The thing about fairs and festivals is they're huge in their communities and for the state because they utilize a lot of the hotels, motels, restaurants, grocery stores, that type thing, and people don't take into account that a lot of these fairs and festivals book outside agencies who actually come in. They need places to stay, places to buy fuel, places to get service on their vehicles, that type thing. So they're a huge economic impact, not only on their general community in that county, but also on the whole state as they're passing through.
Gard says fairs and festivals are largely manned by volunteers. She says the message to lawmakers today is to remember the value of the state's fairs and festivals when it comes to the limited funding they receive from the state. For the Legislature Today, I'm Suzanne Higgins at the Capitol.
And this has been the Legislature Today. Tomorrow, we'll meet the new Commissioner of Agriculture, former Senator Walt Helmick. We welcome your questions and comments about the issues at this legislative session. You can email us at feedback@wvpubcast.org. Full episodes of the Legislature Today are available on our website. I'm Beth Voorhees. Thank you for joining us. Good night.
Support for the Legislature Today has been provided by the following. The High Technology Foundation, headquartered at the I-79 Technology Park in Fairmont. Online at wvhtf.org. Connecting West Virginia families and businesses through high-speed internet services. Learn more about connecting at frontier.com.